Moving on now, the heads of 3 top U.S. universities were grilled by House Republicans over anti-Semitism on their campuses.
I really could not believe this yesterday. I thought it.
Why is this so hard?
I actually thought that someone had doctored the tapes.
Why is this so hard? The presidents of Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania testified before the House Committee on Education and the Workforce yesterday. Committee members questioned the university leaders about what steps are being taken to fight anti-Semitism on their campuses, which has increased significantly following the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks. Here is Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York with what would seem to be an easy question for the presidents of Harvard and Penn.
And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
yes
speech
or
becomes,
no?
if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes.
Willie,
what's going on?
We have heard for almost a decade now that speech is violence. There was actually an editorial page editor who was fired from the Times because a U.S. senator put an op-ed in the paper, and the argument was speech is violence. On college campuses, we've heard speech is violence, speech is violence. And yet, these presidents at 3 of the most prestigious schools in America are asked whether calling for the genocide of Jews would actually prompt a response from the administration. They couldn't answer the question. Let's do what we do here, and let's ask. Let's change the context. What if there were groups marching around the campus calling for the genocide today of Native Americans? What if there were students?
You get it.
No, I'm going to keep going. Marching across the campus, calling for the genocide of Hispanics, calling for the genocide of immigrants, calling for the genocide of Black Americans, calling for the genocide of Asian Americans, calling for the genocide of Baptists, calling for the genocide of Catholics, calling for the genocide of any other group but Jews. What would these presidents say? How long would a student still be on campus if that student had a bullhorn calling for the genocide of any of these groups?
It's a question that answers itself because we all know. I mean, there have been cases over the last several years, as you say, speech is violence, where if a kid at certain schools hears an opinion
Words
from
matter.
a professor or a fellow student that he or she disagrees with, it's a federal case on campus, and kids are allowed to go to safe spaces with coloring books. So, Donnie, I wonder, honestly, there's so much to say here. That's such, as Congresswoman Stefanik said, that's such an easy question to answer. I wonder if these college presidents fully appreciate the damage they've done to their schools in the last 2 months or so, with this ongoing charade where they equivocate and they say, yeah, it's bad, but, and they're being forced. And how long did they have to prepare their answers for a congressional hearing? Come up with something.
I was sick to my stomach watching those performances. And Joe, the answer to your question, if any other group was singled out for genocide, whether it's Catholics, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's African Americans, whether it's Asians, we know what would happen. There would be justifiable outrage. But somehow the genocide of Jews falls in a gray area, falls in an area of context. And I'm even tired of the word anti-Semitism. It's Jew hatred. And basically, this is not a pink-haired person, a woke person who grew up on TikTok and can't give an intelligent answer what pure evil is. This is an institutionalist. These are presidents of universities.
But Donnie, let's talk about what's happened over the last 2 days. We have seen members of Congress, we have seen international organizations saying about Jewish women being raped that you've got to have context to it. Really, it happens in war. Yes, but yes, at the same time, yes, there can never be a condemnation of Jewish women being raped, savagely executed with genital mutilation. They can't just say that is abhorrent. Yes, but, or yes, so the raping of Jewish women requires context when the raping of other women doesn't. And the calling for the genocide of Jews, that requires context, but calling for the genocide for any other group does not. The hatred of Jews this has been, Donnie, it's been so exposed, and it's been so exposed all over America, on the far right, on the far left, but also at our most elite institutions.
I'm going to also say what I've said before. Where are our leaders? Where are our leaders in corporate America? Where are our leaders in the entertainment industry? The silence is deafening. This is hatred towards Jews. You are condoning genocide. I promised I wasn't going to get worked up this morning. This is so dangerous. You have 70% of kids at MIT afraid to admit that they're Jews walking around. This is where we are, and there is going to be violence. Because when an institutionalist, when a head of a university can't come out in black and white and say, this is abhorrent, you are basically endorsing it. And if these presidents have their jobs one more day, it's disgusting.